Hello, dear friends. Moedim Simcha. It's the intermediate days of Chag Sukkot, Festival of Tabernacles here in Jerusalem. I'd like to say a few words that I said today um, at the synagogue, actually at two synagogues, Beit Yosef, and then after the Ansharot. And it's concerning these days. I want to start off, though, with a story. I spent Rosh Hashanah in a city in Romania called Cluj. The city is near the Hungarian border. It used to be called, when it was under the Germans, it was called Klausenburg. The Jews used to refer to it as Kloisenberg. And it is a city which had 18,000 Jews before the Second World War. And then due to the war, 16,000 were killed in Auschwitz. Only 2,000 remained. So really the community was decimated. They called me in, and this is the second Rosh Hashanah that I have been there, Rosh Hashanah, Jewish New Year's. And I was looking for a story to tell them about their community. So I looked for one, and I found one, told by Rabbi Shlomo Riskin, Rabbi of Efrat in Israel. And it was a story about Rabbi Yekutiel Halberstam, who was known as the Tzanz Kloisenberg Rebbe. He was a Hasidic Rebbe, originally from Poland. He was born in Poland to the Hasidic dynasty of Tzanz. And when he moved to Cluj, he was known as the Kloisenberg Rebbe, so he was the Tzanz Kloisenberg Rebbe. After the war, he survived Auschwitz, but his whole family was killed. And he started again in New York City. And the story told by Rabbi Riskin is that he was 12 years old at the time. It was 1952. And he wanted to go see the Kloisenberg Rebbe, who had a synagogue. And his synagogue was mostly Holocaust survivors. Of course, he was only 12 years old, and it was a half an hour away. So after negotiating with his parents, he went. And it was the Torah portion of Ki Tavo from Deuteronomy chapter 28, which talks about the blessings and the curse. Now, as the Baal Koreh, as the reader of the Torah was reading, the custom is that when you come to the list of the curses in the Torah, in the book of Deuteronomy, you say it in a quiet voice. So the Torah reader started reading the curses in a quiet voice. And the Kloisenberg Rebbe heard this, Rabbi Halberstam, and he said in Yiddish, Hecher, which means louder. Well, the reader thought he misunderstood what the Rebbe was saying, so just continued reading in a soft voice, like the tradition. And this time the Rebbe got up, and he said to him again, Hecher, I said louder. Okay, so that's what he wants. So in a loud voice, word by word, he started reading the klalot, the curses mentioned in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28. After they finished that aliyah, that part of the reading of the Torah, and of course you pause for a final blessing, the Rebbe of Kloisenberg stood up before his congregation, who, as I mentioned, were all Holocaust survivors. And he said to them, dear friends, we can bear testimony because we are witnesses. In our lifetimes, every one of the curses mentioned in this book of Deuteronomy came true. Nothing was missing from the list. Everything came true. And now we beseech God and we demand that now that all the curses have come true in our lifetime, we demand that the blessings shall come true as well. Well, there are blessings and there are curses. In the Jewish year, we have something like that too. We have two periods in the Jewish year, which consist of 22 days. One of them is mentioned in the Torah, specifically in the Bible. And this is a time of jubilation and joy and introspection. And another time of 22 days is not mentioned in the 5 books of the Moses. but it happened and made its way into our calendar year. The first one I'm referring to from Rosh Hashanah until Shmini Atzeret, 22 days. We start with Jewish New Year's, a time when we talk about God's monarchy over the universe. And then Yom Kippur, the time of introspection, and the Day of Atonement. And from there, we continue into the Sukkot holiday, the holiday of tabernacles, which is called the holiday of Simcha, Zman Simchatenu, the holiday of joy and jubilation, where we build a hut, where we build a sukkah, a booth, which is referred to by the prophet Amos, Sukkat David Hanofelet, the sukkah of David, which is falling, which is, of course, a hint to the temple, which is called the sukkah of David, the booth of David. And so we're building a house, and we move into this house for all our meals during those 7 days. And we build our individual house, and together as a people, we build our national house, the sovereignty in the state of Israel, and eventually hoping for the full building of Jerusalem and the temple, when again, the word of God will go from Zion and Jerusalem to all of the world. These are the days of happiness and jubilation, which ends off with the building of a house, which remind us of the building of the temple in Jerusalem. But then we have another 22 days in our calendar, which seem to be the exact opposite. It's called the 3 weeks from the 17th day of Tammuz in the summer till the 9th day of Av, referred to as Tisha B'Av. During these 3 weeks, which is a time of mourning, we mourn for 3 weeks. We start with a fast day, we end with a fast day, and at the culmination of these 3 weeks, of these 22 days, we commemorate the destruction of a house, the destruction of both temples, the first and the second on the 9th of Av. It's sort of like an inverted universe. 22 days of happiness and 22 days of mourning. These two collection of days stare each other in the face in our calendar. And the days of mourning shouldn't have happened. The prophet Zechariah says about these fast days, which we fast over the morning of the temple. He says, Tzom HaRevi'i, the fast of the 4th, which is Shiva Asar Tammuz, the 4th biblical month since Nisan. Tzom HaChamishi, the fast of the 5th. Tzom HaShavi'i, in the fast of the 7th. Tzom HaAsiri, in the fast of the 10th, the 4 fast days over Jerusalem. Yiyu LeBeit Yisrael L'Sason Simcha, will be for Israel and Judah days of Sason and Simcha, of happiness and jubilation. V'emet v'shalom ehavu, and love, truth, and peace. So the prophet is basically saying when Jerusalem is rebuilt and the temple will be rebuilt, these fast days will be abolished, which means that they're temporary in our calendar. They've been temporary for a long time, for over 2,000 years, probably since the destruction of the first temple already, which is 2,500 years. But they are temporary. Between these two times, 22 days and 22 days, which remind us of the alphabet. The Hebrew alphabet has 22 letters. According to the book of creation, the book of formation, Sefer Yetzirah, letters are referred to as building blocks, as stones, and words are called houses. Shalosh avanim bonot shisha batim. It says in Sefer Yetzirah that 3 stones can be configured in such that you can make 6 words out of them. You have stones, which are the letters, and buildings. So the 22 letters, which according to the Midrash and according to the Midrash of Otiyot Rabbi Akiva and the Midrash Rabbah, is how God created the universe, the building blocks of the universe. So too we have twice 22, where we're building our private houses and the national house of Israel, and the time when the house is being destroyed. These are separated by 50 days. 50 also in our tradition represents a whole system, a whole spiritual system. We have what's called the 50 levels of intelligence. And we also have standing juxtaposition to that what's called the 50 levels of impurity. It's like these 2 days of 22 facing each other in inverse universes, converted universe. So what does this mean? Last year at Simchat Torah, which is supposed to be the epitome of the days of our happiness, we had tragedy in the state of Israel. On October 7, 2023, the Jewish festival of Simchat Torah, of Shmini Atzeret. And we wondered what was wrong. And we fought our enemies and our brave soldiers, many of whom are volunteers. People don't know that because we have a very large reserve duty calling in Israel. Most of the army are what we would call volunteers. It's people giving their lives for the future of this country and for the people. A lot of brave people, a lot of dedicated people who believe in defending human life. And we think to ourselves, what went wrong? Even before the investigations. And it says in the Talmud, Puk chazi mayama dabar. Sometimes you have to look to see what the people are saying. What the people are saying was, we have to build up our unity better, not let people divide us, because divisions are tragic and unnecessary. But how do you take unity from being a slogan to being something real? How do you create unity in a society, especially in a society like the state of Israel, where you've had Jews from all the countries of the globe almost? How do you strengthen the common denominator? How do you overcome divisiveness? Well, we have a tradition on the Sukkot holiday, which is called Ushpizin, which is usually translated as guests. And they are the 7 shepherds of the Jewish people. Yes, we have a concept of what's called the 7 shepherds, and the 7 Ushpizin. Now, I have a bit of insight to make. When I looked into the word Ushpizin, it turns out it doesn't mean guests. I'll give you an example. The Talmud says that the temple stands in the tribe of Judah, as we know, but there was one piece of land that stuck out from the land of Benjamin in the south, who was south of Judah, and this strip of land went right into the temple area, and upon that strip of land sat the altar of the temple. And the Talmud says, this is because Benjamin, because of things that he did, merited to be the host of God's divine Shekhinah, divine presence. Ushpizin is the term which is used. Ushpizin shel Shekhinah, the host for the divine presence. When you look up Marcus Jastrow, which is one of the definitive dictionaries of Talmudic Aramaic, he also translates Ushpiza or Ushpizin as hosts or innkeepers. That would mean that the 7 guests that we invite to the sukkah every night, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Moses, Aaron, Joseph, and David, are the hosts for that night. We do invite them as if they're guests, but they're the hosts. Now, what does it mean to be a host? In this sense, it means that these days are imbued with the teachings, with what the lives meant of those people. And there are many things we learn from our Ushpizin, from the hosts of that night. Tonight, I talk to you for the second night, it's Isaac. But let's go over each one of the 7 shepherds, the 7 hosts, the Ushpizin. What can they teach us about what we can do to help unite ourselves as a people? Well, let's look at what they did. Abraham. Abraham was willing to stand up and fight for Sodom and Gomorrah, who he didn't even identify with. But just because they were human beings, and he thought they should have a fair trial, he said to God, look, maybe they're 50 righteous people. God said, unfortunately, they're not. They're not 40, they're not 30, they're not 20, etc. Why? Not because necessarily Abraham liked them, but they deserve justice. Abraham was willing to host 3 people who he didn't know that they were angels. He thought they were just pagans, and he brought them into his house and he fed them. When God said to Abraham, you're going to have another child, Abraham said, well, this kid Ishmael, he's a nice boy. He can live before you too. That's okay. Abraham was always willing to accept the other. And we have to even learn as a people to accept the other, the people maybe don't agree with us 100%. I continue. Isaac. Isaac loved Esau, and says, and Rebekah loved Jacob. But Isaac didn't love Jacob? Of course he did. But Isaac knew that Esau was the challenged child, and the needy child is the one you spend time with. So he spent lots of time with Esau, trying to get him to come around in some fashion. Just like he did, according to our tradition, with Ishmael, and succeeded. He thought maybe I could do the same with Esau. It's loving the one who has needs and not shunning them, trying to help them come around and not giving up. I continue, Jacob. Jacob knew that his sons were pulling the wool over his eyes when they said that Joseph was eaten by a wild animal. Tarof Toraf Yosef. But he kept his mouth shut for 20 years in order not to destroy the unity of his own family, and pretended he did not know. How do I know? Because when he blesses his children in Parshat Vayechi at the end of his life, at the end of the book of Genesis, and each one of the children he gives a blessing, he says to Judah, Gur Aryeh Yehuda, you are like a lion cub, miteref beni alita, which could be translated one of 2 ways. Either miteref beni alita, meaning from devouring, oh my son, you have exalted yourself. Or it could be from devouring my son, you have exalted yourself, which means that you did not do it in the end because he's still living. But the point is that no matter how you read that verse, it seems to hint at the fact that Jacob knew all along that it wasn't really a wild animal. Judah was involved in some way. He wasn't sure exactly what, but he was afraid to ask and did not want to kill the unity of the rest of the family, and waited to see how things would play out. Let's keep going. Moses is told by God, I will destroy the Jewish people after what happened, the sin of the golden calf. Moses says, you can't do that. What are the Egyptians going to say? What will the nations say? If you do that, take me out of your book. So God didn't. Moses was willing to stand up to a rebellious people because he knew their potential. Aaron, Ohev Shalom, Rodev Shalom, always a man of peace, trying to pull things together and people together. Joseph at the end of his father's life, after his father passes away, the brothers come over to him and they say they were afraid that Joseph would now take revenge against them for what they did to him. Joseph said, no, it wasn't even you. It was God's plan to bring you here. He was willing just to let bygones be bygones, just to keep the family together. And David, when Natan the prophet said to David about Kibsat Arash, he told him a parable about the man who owned one sheep who he loved. David understood it was about his sins, and he said, I am the man and I'm the sinner. He didn't look for excuses. So there are all these things our hosts, our Ushpizin can teach us about unity, about trying to be inclusive of your brother. Because when push comes to shove, within this people, even the ones who don't agree with us will stand up for us in the end. And so it's a time to bring unity again, to make Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah the day of happiness that it was supposed to be, to create that unity which will again bring the people together as we are in this battle for our survival. And when we have unity and we are together, with God's help, we overcome all our enemies. And as we do so and move forwards, the day will come when the 22 days of mourning, of destruction, from the Shiva Asar to B'Tammuz until Tisha B'Av will also change with the building of Jerusalem, and the word of the Lord shall go from Zion and Jerusalem with messages of peace and truth to the whole world. Chag Sameach, happy holidays, shalom, shalom.